Aspire Communication provides a wide variety of image, publicity and branding services to established industries and emerging talent. For nearly 20 years, Aspire has worked with a diverse roster of over 120 technology, health, political and talent clients, garnering regional and national awards in the United States. So if you're in need of a publicity and branding services, call 888 405 6730 or visit www.aspirecommunications.com. G'day, Brad Scott here, the host of the highly successful Naked Zombie radio show. Now, not only am I the host of this wonderful program, but I'm also a freelance broadcaster and voiceover artist. So if you're looking for someone to sell your product or be a part of your next voiceover project, and someone whose voice is heard in places like China, Japan, the UK, the USA, the Ukraine, and of course, Australia. Now, I'm easy to contact. You can either go to the contacts page and leave your details, or you can ring my professional studio on this phone number, +61 731 03 0566, and let me know what your next project is, and I'll get a quote out to you ASAP. Simple as that. There's no commission structures, there's no third parties, and there's no agents. I will be working solely for you. So get in touch with me if you want one of Australia's leading voiceover talents to help you promote and sell your business or product. Thank you. I'm Brad Scott.
Well, that's enough of that crap. Welcome to Naked Zombie Paranormal Radio with your hosts, Brad Scott and Wadsy.
It is the 4th of August 2011 and you are listening to the best in Australian paranormal and pop culture radio, Naked Zombie Radio. I am of course your host Brad Scott, and joining me tonight is a man of many talents. He is the author of many books including The Covert Agenda, The FBI Files, Cosmic Crashes, Strange Secrets, co-authored with Andy Roberts, Three Men Seeking Monsters, Body Snatchers in the Desert, On the Trail of Saucer Spies, Man Monkey, Celebrity Secrets, Memoirs of a Monster Hunter, There is Something in the Woods, Science Fiction Secrets, Contactees Monster of Texas, co-authored by Ken Gerard, Final Events, NASA Conspiracies, and of course his latest novel and book, The Real Men in Black. Please welcome to the Naked Zombie Radio, Mr. Nick Redfern. G'day Nick, how are you?
Hey Brad, I'm doing good. How's it going?
Oh, I'm good, mate, good. And thank you for joining the Naked Zombie tonight, mate, and sharing your knowledge with all our listeners.
Well, you're welcome.
No, thank you. Look, mate, listen, just quickly now, you've written so many books, I mean, and they're all to do with the paranormal. The question that I think a lot of my listeners are going to ask is, how did you get started into this? What made you decide to go down this road?
Well, I mean, it was kind of two things, really. One was that when I was about probably 5 or 6 years old, my mum and dad took me on a week's holiday to Scotland, and you know, if you go to Scotland, you got to see Loch Ness, and so we spent a day at Loch Ness, and my dad told me this story about the Loch Ness monster, and of course, you know, when you're sort of five or 6 years old, you realize, you know, you kind of equate it with stories of monsters under the bed or in the wardrobe or whatever, you know, but you know, that sort of got me interested in, you know, wow, even that age, you know, wow, there's monsters in Scotland, you know. And the other thing that also relates to my dad was that that was his job.
Yep.
And he was actually involved in a couple of UFO incidents. This is obviously, you know, still the Cold War era. And aircraft were scrambled to try and intercept these objects, and the pilots couldn't get close, and there were these sort of brightly lit balls of light that were sort of playing with the cat and mouse with the pilots. And this went on for sort of several days, and everybody was basically sworn to secrecy and told, you know, you won't discuss this. And my dad didn't actually tell me about this till I was about 14, maybe. So that was kind of the background I had in terms of being exposed to the paranormal. But when I finished school, I'll be the first to admit I wasn't the best of students. I was pretty much useless at school, failed everything.
You and me both, mate.
I kind of left at 17 thinking, what the hell am I going to do now?
Yep.
When sort of reality sort of hits in, other than just going down the pub with my mates,
Yep.
And so I thought, well, I'll still keep doing that, but I've got to find some way to earn their money. So,
Yep.
I was kind of like, what do I want to do? And there was actually a job opening on a local magazine in the area I was living at the time called Zero. And Zero was basically a magazine, it was like entertainment, music, fashion. It was geared to teenagers up to mid-20s. And I thought, well, it sounds interesting. I don't have to wear a suit and tie, and it's kind of cool. Every day is different. And I thought, I'll try that. And I actually applied for it and got the job. And I worked for them for about 2 years. And that sort of gave me a really good background and tutor in journalism. And I found, that in mainstream journalism, which I still do a lot of, I enjoyed that. And so then I thought after a while, well, why not try and combine the background, the interest in the paranormal with the, the work and the learning that I'd done on the magazine. And so that's basically what I did, sort of like a dual approach, if you like.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like, you started very much as a journalist and doing this sort of work, and you sort of progressed now. So from when your dad's earlier, from the stories of the Loch Ness Monster and stuff like that, what made you decide to one day sit down and go, I'm going to write a book on the paranormal? Now, your first book, was it The Covert Agenda?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that book basically is a study of files that surfaced through the British government's sort of freedom of information legislation back in the early 1990s. And what happened was that I started writing for UFO publications, sort of freelance stuff in the mid-80s. And by the early 1990s, when you write articles and things like this, sometimes people contact you and say, hey, I've got a story, I want to tell you. And, if you want to make use of it in a magazine article or whatever, that's fine. And so by the early 90s, when the government started releasing some of its files, I'd also got like a substantial amount of reports from like military people in Britain, police officers, government people who'd, been willing to share their stories, because I was focusing primarily on the government angle. So, people who had some knowledge would often contact me.
Yep.
Then, of course, as I said, coincidentally, this tied in with the government releasing its own files. So I thought, well, nobody's really written a book before that details the full history, to that point that we knew it anyway, of the British government's involvement in UFOs. And that's what Covert Agenda was about. It was a historical study of how the government had got involved in the subject from the 40s through to the 90s. And that's one of the things I always sort of focus upon when I'm writing a book, is that, you don't want to go over old ground and just cheat the reader and they have to think, well, hang on, we've seen all this. You want to put out something new. And so, because the files were all new and the testimony and reports I got from the people who contacted me was new as well, I thought, well, this would be the ideal time and subject to get this out. And, and that's what I did with that first book, was to, sort of dig deep at a full-length level into what the government knew about the subject.
And it's been a long road, hasn't it, for you? And like the amount of research that goes into each one of your books. I mean, I have read quite a few of your books now, and the amount of detail and the research you go, they must take you forever. I mean, to dig as deep as you do, if you know what I mean. I mean, you don't just sort of go, I'll make this up and I'll just write down whatever I feel like. The thought and concept behind the structure of your books, and look, me being, I write a lot of articles myself, nothing like you, old mate. I'm more on the broadcast radio side of it, but I still do stuff. And I just know doing little stuff, the amount of stuff you've got to put into it. But these are full books on how deep and how dark do you have to go to find this information?
Well, I mean, deeply, really. I mean, from my perspective, I work from home full time, writing. So, and I pretty much start each morning like 7 and go until 5. I put in like a 10-hour day, and I usually have lunch in front of the computer. So, you're kind of sort of just pounding out the words, for 10 hours a day, Monday to Friday. And I actually try and keep to those hours. My wife works full time, so she gets home at like 5, and then we stop at the same time pretty much, and have our own time then, and then do that on weekends. I try and take weekends off as well, unless I'm lecturing. So in other words, I've got sort of 10 hours a day, 7 till 5, writing, researching, and every day, Monday to Friday. So in that respect, what sounds a bit of a daunting task actually becomes less so. Unfortunately, there are some authors who, they've written great books, but it might take them 4 or 5 years to do because, they might have a family and a 9-to-5 job or whatever, and and with the best will in the world, they can only put in 2 hours a night or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means the process is longer. But that's, as I said, that's probably the main thing I do. And I always, having a background in journalism, try to apply sort of journalistic techniques to not just doing the research, but verification, doing on-the-record interviews where possible with people, audio recording them, so that they're kept on file, trying to get corroborative data, whether it's like government documents to support a witness story or vice versa. Wherever I go places, get photographs of locations and people, and, sort of really apply the same techniques that you would if you were writing a journalistic story about, I don't know, a murder or a car crash. You just go out and gather the facts and corroborate them. So.
Do you find when you go and you interview people and you start getting the information and put it all together, do you find there's much people that just don't want to talk about it? Like if you're approaching the government agencies and stuff, like we're going to get onto your new book in a minute actually, which is called The Real Men in Black. And before we get on to that, people can actually go to this website to buy your books. And look, folks and listeners of The Naked Zombie, I've read a few of Nick's books and they're just fascinating reads. They're excellent written. They're just structured so well. And you can actually check this out if you go to http :::, is that right?
It's //
Yeah, / Nick, so Nick Redfern's books.blogspot.com. Now what I'll do is I'll actually have this linked onto the site so people will be able to click straight onto that. So folks, please do take the time to check out Nick's books because they are well worth every read, every page of it. So they're very, very exciting, well put together. So we're getting back onto the side of it, mate. Regarding the whole, so you sit down, you do the information. Now, when you contact the government branches and stuff like that, do you find much opposition, or do you find it's easy being Nick Redfern, if you know what I mean? Because you have been around for quite some time, and these are questions because there's a lot of new authors out there who are trying to make their mark within the paranormal field and writing, getting their feet wet, so to speak. How do you find it?
Well, it's a challenge. Even though I've done, a lot of books, the fact is I probably submit maybe, 9 or 10 ideas to publishers every year, of which probably 2 get accepted. It's because publishers are always on the lookout for new ideas and new talent. And, for anybody listening to the show who's contemplating writing a book, they're in a very good position because what publishers really want, they actually don't care if it's an established author. They want something that's groundbreaking and new. So if there's anybody listening to the show who wants to write a book and they've got a new story, ironically, they're actually in a better position than, some author who's been around for years and who's got nothing new to say. That's actually the worst position for any established author to be in, which is why, I always strive to find new ideas and angles because, as I said, you don't want to cheat the reader. But in terms of getting information, I don't think if you've written previous books and people have read them, they are inclined to contact you and share their stories, where otherwise you might be thinking, which was first, the chicken or the egg? You find the stories and write about them, or do people contact you and then you write about them? It's sort of a slow process, but then the more books you do, the more people do contact you. But, that's also dictated by the fact that you want to be able to provide new information as well. So, I've got good stories.
Oh, you have?
They want to write a book. I would encourage them to do that.
Sorry to cut you off there, mate, but see, with your books, like each book is a different gender topic, really. I mean, Cosmic Crashes, Strange Secrets, Three Men Seeking Monsters, Body Snatchers in the Desert. I mean, Saucer Spies, Mad Monkey. They're so. I mean, even the names of the book just have intrigue to them. But look, yeah, like I said, folks, check them out. But what we're here to really talk about today is your new book, which is The Real Men in Black. Now, your agent actually has sent me a copy, so I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so I haven't gone through it. It hasn't arrived because I live so far away. But for the people that are interested in this book, let's talk about it, because I know nothing about the book, and I'm sorry, I wish I had it in front of me right now, but I don't. Can you give us a breakdown on the book and where it took you, and how the Men in Black, and it's been an interesting subject through the movies and the cartoon series they did, and there's numerous books out there on them. Like in Australia, we call them the Men in Khaki, if you know what I mean, because we're Aussies and we got a bad sense of humour. So could you tell us a bit about the Men in Black and how that sort of come about for us, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm sure, a lot of people, particularly outside the UFO field and the paranormal field, their first exposure to the Men in Black would be with the Hollywood films with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, and they're fun adventure films. Certainly, for most people in the general public, the Men in Black are simply a Hollywood creation. Most people aren't aware, and the comic books were inspired by real-life accounts of people who said they'd encountered the Men in Black. They've been silenced after having a UFO encounter or experience. There'd been sort of this late-night knock on the front door, and these three kind of ominous-looking characters in black suits and ties and sunglasses and etc. would essentially just warn them not to talk about their UFO experiences. And one of the things, or it's actually two things that sort of occurred to me when I was sort of scouting around for a new idea to write about. One was the fact that, there was this public perception that it was all just stuff of Hollywood. Yep. And the other one was even within the UFO field, a lot of people assumed it was very much like a historical mystery, more of like the 1940s to the 60s. But again, when people would contact me, I got a lot of reports right up to the present day. I think the latest one I have in the book is either 2009 or 2010. And the reports today are no different to back in the 40s, even down to sort of like the gangster-style clothing, and the fedora, trilby-type hats they used to wear back then. And so I thought, well, this is an angle that hasn't really been covered before to a full extent. There certainly have been books written about the Men in Black, but what I wanted to do was, go back to the beginnings, look at all the classic cases, but don't certainly overwhelm the book with the old cases, focus on new ones, and more importantly, address all the different theories that had been suggested and interview all the key players. And I think for this book, I probably interviewed more than anybody for any of the previous books. I think I interviewed like 30 people going back to the 50s, guys who are now in their 80s who were sort of 25 when the Men in Black mystery kicked off, and they had all these fantastic stories to tell. So that was the aim of the book, really, was to present people with hopefully, a full accounting of the mystery and what it implies and who the Men in Black might be.
Did you think that the Men in Black, and this is through your book, do you think anything had to do with the Roswell incidents when the Men in Black came out to be? I reckon it was before then. I mean, this is the thing.
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's, people think that it all sort of kicked off 47 or whatever. Yeah. But I've got a couple of cases in the book where it sounds like Men in Black encounters, but literally going back centuries, where people had paranormal experiences, and they would talk about how sort of guys in black cloaks, kind of looking like something out of like a gothic Edgar Allan Poe type story or Bram Stoker, would turn up late at night, in some old cottage in 1600s England, and warn the person not to talk about this paranormal experience they'd had.
So this goes back hundreds of years. So the Men in Black is actually older than we think, than Hollywood has portrayed.
Yeah.
Of course, Hollywood would do that.
The kind of the uniform or costume, if you like, has changed over the years. But sort of the methods and, the tactics employed, turning up late at night, black suit, kind of ominous looking, or black outfit, warning people not to divulge certain things, and then vanishing into the night again. Mm-hmm. It's all sort of staple parts. And as I point out in the book, I'm pretty sure that some ancient sort of vampire-type legends might have been born out of early Men in Black encounters where people had paranormal experiences and these sort of dark cloaked figures would turn up late at night. And the weird thing about the Men in Black is that they never enter people's homes until they're invited. And that's a classic aspect of vampire legends, that they can't enter your home until you invite them
invited in. It's also to do with the black-eyed children and all the rest of it. It's the same thing. I mean, we won't get on the black-eyed children, that's for another show, but so do you reckon with all that sort of stuff that's happening throughout the ages, from the 1600s through to today, the Men in Black have been controlling the whole UFO conspiracy theory? Do you think they're a government branch? Are they solely private enterprise, as it were? And do they harbour extraterrestrials and stuff like that? I mean, these are all questions that people have been fascinated for eons.
Well, I mean, my personal view is that, having sort of studied this subject extensively, I think there's actually several categories of Men in Black. There's no doubt at all that some Men in Black do originate with government agencies whose role it is to sort of keep the lid and clamp down on the UFO issue, and particularly with certain sensitive cases, where national security might be involved, they'll send people out to intimidate witnesses. I mean, there's actually a few files, granted not many, but files have surfaced where we can trace back, where someone said, we got this weird visit, say, in the 60s, and this guy told him not to talk about the UFO incidents. And today, I've got several cases in the book where the files on these people's encounters have surfaced through the Freedom of Information Act, and we can trace the people back to, or the Men in Black, to like intelligence agencies of the Air Force, for example. Yep. But there are other Men in Black. There's like another category which are far weirder, and this is the one I actually... Men in Black, that actually almost sound alien, as crazy as it sounds. They, people talk about they look strange. They're sort of only 5 foot to 5 feet tall, very power, almost like anorexic and anemic looking. They have these eyes with behind these big black wraparound sunglasses, and they almost look kind of like hybrids. So I think, who they are, that's a bigger question. And I actually think, however we define the paranormal, or a combination of all those things, I think that's what this second category is. So there's a government angle, there's a second angle, and I think it's possible from some of the files and comments that have been made that the government actually doesn't have a full understanding properly of who these other MIB are. It's kind of like even they are trying to figure out what's going on with them. So.
Oh, that's amazing. Look, so people who listen to this now, and I'll just explain to you what's happening, Nick. Every now and then you're dropping out, only for like a half a second. It's not you. It's this. Every time we talk about something like with the Mothman or Men in Black or anything to do that's got a lot of conspiracy behind it, we always have something going wrong. So it's just every now and then we just have a little bit of a like half a second dropout. So it's fine. We'll just keep recording. I mean, that's just what happens. Unfortunately, it's the only time this sort of happens. So we were discussing the fact that with the Men in Black, these been around for the 1600s. We're not too sure whether or not they're actually government-based or they're private, are we? That's the thing. We don't actually know. Has anyone ever come forward and said, hey, I used to be someone who's involved in the Men in Black in that sense, but I suppose if you go and break the code of silence, I guess it was, you'll be bumped off pretty quickly. But has anyone actually come forward with credible evidence to say that, hey, I used to do that?
Well, no one's actually come forward, or you could argue that they've been identified by default. I'll give you a good example.
Okay.
One of the cases that I include in the book, I interviewed back in the 1990s a woman named Anne Henson, who used to live in the south of England, or it still does actually live in the south of England. And back in the early 1960s, when she was in her late teens, she had a UFO encounter. She woke up in the middle of the night, and there was this strange ball of light hovering over a nearby hill that backed onto the farm that she lived on with her family at the time. And this was sort of like a weird ball of light sort of dancing around the sky at very low level. And she saw it across the course of several nights. And she contacted a local Air Force base, didn't get a reply, and thought, well, that's the end of the story. About a week later, 9, 10 o'clock at night, literally that late, there was a knock on the front door. And Mum opened the door, and there was this guy there in a black suit, black car parked outside, and said, "I've come to speak to your daughter. She's had a," and he actually didn't say we've received a letter. He just said she's had an unusual experience. I'd like to talk to her about it. Mm-hmm. And of course, back in those days, I guess people were a bit sort of daunted, and the mother let her in. And so Anne told me how this guy basically told her not to talk about the encounter, actually confiscated or took with him, but he said he would give her back, but she never got him back, some compass notes and drawings she'd made of the object and its movements, and then sort of vanished into the night as mysteriously as it arrived. Now, this, by all accounts, would be classed as a Man in Black encounter. Now, this is one of the cases where years later, sort of 40 years after Anne's encounter, the files were released by the British government through the Freedom of Information Act, and they actually named the Man in Black. He was actually a Sergeant J.W. Scott, who was attached to an arm of the British Royal Air Force called the Provost and Security Services, and they're kind of like the James Bonds of the Air Force. They get involved with espionage operations. So, in other words, this was a definitive Man in Black. Now, he didn't come forward and say, years later, "I'm a Man in Black," but the fact that the file surfaced and named him and identified who he worked for, revealed who the Man in Black was. So we have a few cases like that where we can trace them back and they are named, even though they didn't, necessarily come forward themselves.
Has there been any reports, like with people who had experienced the Men in Black, that talk about it? Now, look, I'm trying to separate the movie side of it to the realistic side of it, and I think this is very important. No, we see in the movie side of it, they have a lot of cool alien weaponry and stuff like that. Has anything ever been mentioned regarding to that side of it? Like, did they carry weird-looking guns or the things that erase your memory, or if you know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to separate, because Hollywood puts so much emphasis onto the theatrics of these things, and of course they have to. It's entertainment. Has there been any reports on people seeing stuff like that? It was just not right. It's just they had weird bits of equipment or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, there hasn't been so much equipment, but there actually is a very close parallel with the movies in one of the things that the Men in Black, in the films at least, do achieve with these sort of gadgets and whatever. You probably know that in the films they kind of have this flashing device that wipes the memory clean of the person, so they don't remember it, or they're sort of fed a cover story of what really happened. Now, it doesn't quite go to that extent in reality, but a lot of people who've had Men in Black encounters have said, they've gone to the doorbell's rang, or there's been a loud thump on the door at 10:30 at night. And of course, most people, it's dark at night. You think, who the hell's that knocking on the door this time of night? People wonder, is it bad news? So they go to the door. There's these three guys on the doorstep, kind of menacing, weird looking, and they don't often identify themselves. They just say, "We understand you've had a strange experience. We'd like to come in and talk to you about it." And in the same way that the witnesses in the movies are kind of rendered into a weird, altered state to forget the incident, it's almost as if the genuine witnesses are also, although they don't forget the experience, they are rendered into like a very strange situation, sort of mindset where they don't think to ask for ID from the people. They just let them in, they sit them down, and they just spill the beans on what happened. It's almost as if they're in some sort of trance-like situation where the MIB holds some sort of sway on closely and intently, and when they're satisfied that the person's told them all they need to know, they get up and leave. And after, why on earth did I just let those total strangers in at 11 o'clock at night, tell them everything that happened, didn't ask for unsafe, and then just watch them walk out the door? It's like common sense and self-will goes safe on. The person slowly starts to come back to normal again. So, you do have, although there's no sort of weaponry and gadgets involved, you do actually have a very similar parallel with, the sorts of things you see in the films where the person is sort of put into a trance to forget the event, if you like.
So that's interesting fact, and also they could also be using some sort of drug or medication. You know, what I mean, quick jab in the arm, if you know what I mean, type thing, and you sort of go,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
like true, sir. It could
you
be
know,
anything, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there are fast-acting drugs, truth serums, that sort of thing. And
They're just sprayed in your face and away you go, and then you go a bit funny, and off. It could be anything. It's very basic. But I guess the next question I have, mate, and this is it's not a silly question, but when you were writing the book, did you have anyone approach you telling you that you're getting a bit close? I think you should drop this, because I know with a few authors that I've spoken to over my time doing the show, that they've had experiences where people have said, listen, drop the subject, don't do the book, don't do the movie, and strange things are happening, if you know what I mean. Did you experience anything like that at all?
I didn't experience anything like, a man in black turning up or anything like that, or anybody from the government saying, keep away from this. But what I did experience on a number of occasions was with the witnesses who said, well, okay, I am willing to share the story for the book and I don't mind you relating it, but, you're getting into some dark and ominous areas, and, I wouldn't want anything to happen to you. It was the witnesses who were concerned because they'd been exposed to the phenomenon. Yeah. And they recognised how sort of dark and disturbing it was to them. I mean, I had a number of people. For example, one of the people I interviewed, I'm sure you know of him, Brad Steiger, who's a long-time acclaimed author. I mean, literally, he's written like nearly 200 books now. Brad told me, if you get involved in the Men in Black mystery, you need to be very careful, because he said basically it's sort of an unknown issue. We're not really sure what's going on, and it can quickly get its grips into you. And he said, just be careful. And when you hear that from someone who's a best-selling author, being in the subject for 40 years, and even he's offering sort of guarded words of advice and concerned words of advice, I should say, regarding whether or not you should get involved in this, it really sort of opens your eyes up to the idea that, wow, this isn't just a bit of adventurous X-Files stuff. You're dealing with a phenomenon that's sort of profoundly psychologically affected and worried a lot of people that have been exposed to it. So.
Now, you're currently in the USA, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, around America. So, you live in. Now, have you got any, just go subject slightly a little bit, now, you're currently touring at the moment, or you're actually promoting the book? Is there any particular places you're going to be in the near future that people can actually come and see you?
Yeah, I'm actually doing speaking at a conference in October, it's actually like the last day in September, the first day in October, and I'm going to be speaking at the Conscious Life Expo. It's September 30th, October the 1st and 2nd, which is in Los Angeles, and I'll be doing like a work, giving people advice to do if you have a Man in Black encounter, how to sort of ward them off, and what to do, and what the things to look out for if you had a UFO experience and you're experiencing Men in Black type activity. And I mean, it's interesting you bring up phone interference. I have a whole sections in the book on people who've had experiences with the Men in Black and then have been subject to what sounds like telephone surveillance and weird noises and voices coming through on the phones, and just strange stuff like this. So I'm going to be covering all these areas.
Yeah, because we're actually suffering that now. I mean, that's the funny thing. As you're talking, we're suffering from that now, which is always find very interesting. Like I said, when I talk about normal subjects, nothing. It's nice and clear, but every now and then I hear this funny sort of noise, and then you sort of drop out for half a second, or makes me wonder a bit. But I'm leaving all this in there, and this is what makes the show unique, I guess, is because we don't edit stuff out. I mean, we leave it pretty raw and as it happens during the show, except if it gets really bad, and then I have to ring the person back and try again. But yeah, mate, you were saying?
I was just going to say, I think sometimes, the interference and noise on the phone, I actually think it's sometimes done deliberately, to sort of intimidate people, just to let them know, hey, we're listening. I mean, because the level of sophistication today, it's quite easy for government people to listen in and not make any noise at all.
Yeah.
They can do it silent. The days of, like you see in the old, detective films where they say keep the person on the line for 4 minutes. That's long gone now.
Oh, it is gone now. It is.
Yeah, and so I think sometimes it's deliberately done. So the person's going to hear it to make them think, oh wow, I'm being watched. And certain people of a certain mindset will get frightened, and they probably would walk away from the subject, which is, very possibly what those who, that's the desired response, if you like. They want them to get out the subject.
Well, they're going to have a hard time with me doing that, unfortunately. I'm too much of a big, scary bugger, if you know what I mean. I'm pretty set in my ways, and I've been doing it for a long time. Nick, this is absolutely fascinating. Look, we've got probably another 20 minutes of the show tonight, and we're going to keep talking about the Men in Black, but also want to touch base with some of your other stories as well, which I just find absolutely interesting. So we're going to next 5 minutes, and that we're going to talk about. Then the next subject of the book I want to talk about is the man monkey. Right, it just screams what the for me, if you know what I mean. So I haven't read this one either. You know what I mean? So these are fantastic titles for books, and they just sort of grab you and go, well, man monkey, what? So I mean, this is fantastic. But what we'll do is we're going to keep going. We're not stopping for any ad breaks because we have it at the front and the back of the show, so we can just talk continuously. All
right, cool.
Okay, on this subject of Men in Black. Now, look, we've been suffering from a bit of phone interference tonight, which is pretty unusual and a bit of a pain at the same time, but we're still getting the point across. With the Men in Black, have you noticed that when people have experienced these things and stuff like that, they drive around in these black cars or black vans or anything like that, do you think that they're doing that deliberately to... Instead of showing up in normal clothes or stuff like that, do you think it's the whole persona of the Men in Black? They show up in the black vehicles, they wear the black clothes, blah, yada, yada. Do you think that gives them that whole eeriness and not to mess with it sort of factor, instead of showing up in a bright pair of pink board shorts and a Hawaiian shirt? If you know what I mean. Does you think that's some more...
I know exactly what you...
I
think you're 100% right. I think what happens is that if we move away from actually we can look at the government people, and the weirder Men in Black, and I think that when we do that, the image of the black sunglasses, suit, skinny tie, fedora hat, not smiling, turned up in threes, black cars, it does intimidate some people, and I think it is done deliberately, and it actually works. It puts the fear of God into some people.
Oh, I feel the same way when the cops show up at my door. No, that's kidding. Mr. Scott, please come down the station. Oh, again? No, it doesn't happen. But that's quite interesting to say that they use this whole persona. And it's like you said, we're going back, started off in the 1600s, wearing the cape, the cloak, I should say, black cloak, knocking on people's farmhouses and stuff like that. They've had an experience. You didn't see anything. And I think back in those days, it would have been more terrifying for people than what it is nowadays, because we sort of get... because of the freedom of information, the internet, and all the other stuff that we deal with, we sort of are aware of their presence. So when they do rock up, it's sort of no big surprise. If you know what I mean, you sort of go, oh, here we go, this is going to be interesting. If you know what I mean. So do you think through technology and stuff like that, it isn't as scary as people make out? Or do you think that people actually deal with the Men in Black are actually petrified? They think, well, these guys are serious, not going to mess with it.
Yeah. I think in advance, if people are thinking what would it be like, they probably would be more along the lines of, well, bring it on and I'll confront them or whatever. But a lot of people who've, been exposed to it afterwards, they're like, that kind of angle or that approach they were going to take just went straight out the window, and they just felt terrified and intimidated. All the plans, that they might have had were just, gone out of mind, and it was like they just totally felt... I mean, a lot of witnesses have been really intimidated and psychologically disturbed to the point where they just said, I'll tell the story, but don't contact me again. I'm walking away from it. And the interesting thing about the Men in Black is that there's no more aspect bigger than the Men in Black side of things when it comes to UFOs that psychologically adversely affects the witnesses. Encounters like abductions can be stressful, but I've never really seen people so petrified as those who've sort of had Men in Black encounters, never mind abductions or whatever. It's the Men in Black that seem to, instill fear more than anything else.
Okay, what we're going to do is now, if anyone else has had experiences in the Men in Black, can they contact you, or can they actually tell their story? So are you looking for more information on the subject at the moment, Nick, or?
Yeah.
Okay, what I'll do is, so any of the listeners to the Naked Zombie, look, if you want to, I have Nick's contact details. I'm not going to put it out for privacy reasons, but if you'd like to contact me with any information, if you have experience around the world with the Men in Black or anything similar to that, then you can email me through the website, go to the contacts page, and I will forward them on to Nick. Is that okay with you, mate?
Yeah, that's cool. I'll be glad to. I always try and respond to people's emails in 24 hours.
Yep. But if you'd like to, if you're happy to give out your email address, that's fine. Otherwise,
I always assure people that. Yeah, I always assure people, I don't share information in emails or anything like that with anybody else unless I get specific, written permission from the person. So everything's, fully confidential.
And they can also contact you via http:// it would be Nick Redfern Books. .blogspot.com. There is no www in front of that whatsoever, but you'll see that on the site. Can they contact you via that page as well?
Yes, they can. They can
Excellent.
Contact me there, and again, happy to chat with people. So.
Excellent. So, like I say, folks, if you want to look, you can give me the details. I'll forward them on to Nick for you, or you can actually speak to him directly via his blogspot, which I'll put on the show as well. Now, fantastic subject, the Men in Black, and this is your book. The Real Men in Black. It's out in bookstores now, I take it. Of course, it is because it's out. Where can they actually find your book, mate? Where is it published at the moment?
Well, it's published by New Page Books. I'm not really sure what your big bookstores are in Australia, but I mean you can get it in certainly in England, in America, in the bookstores, or you can get it in all good online places.
So
like
Amazons and stuff like that will have it as well. Excellent. Yeah. So you can go to Amazon's, you can actually find the location, or you can actually contact Nick directly, if whichever country you live in, because we get a lot of people from China who tune into the show, and I'm a lot of English speaking, so I'm sure they'll be keen to see a bit of different cultural difference. Also, I do have a question now. We'll get off the Men in Black, because we've only probably got another 15-20 minutes to go. I want to sort of talk about the other books so people know what else is out there. Now, like I mentioned before, could you explain to me, what is the man monkey? That's intriguing. Sorry, that intrigues me, man. It's not like the Bigfoot, is it? It's something totally different.
Well, it's kind of similar, but kind of different also. My other big interest, apart from UFOs, is cryptozoology. And cryptozoology is the study of unknown animals, like the Bigfoot in North America, the abominable snowman, the Scottish Loch Ness monster, or where you are in Australia, the yowie.
The yowie.
Yeah. We get a lot of these reports of sort of ape-man type creatures, sea serpents, lake monsters, and that's my other big interest. And actually, it's probably more of an interest to me than UFOs, because I enjoy the sort of road trip angle of going into the rainforests or jungles or the lakes, and trekking around for a few days and staking out these areas late at night and looking for these things. And the Man Monkey is a full-length book that I wrote on one particular creature that's been seen in central England, in a sort of heavily wooded area, which is sort of surrounded by sort of thick old canals and woodland, etc. And it was first seen, or at least first reported publicly, in 1879. And the story was, there's this guy was going home late at night with a horse and cart, and he crossed an old bridge crossing the Shropshire Union Canal in central England. And actually the canal, even to this day, has barely changed. It's just sort of very weird, spooky area of canals, very much tree-shrouded. And the canal's like 80 feet below the bridge. And so, in other words, below the bridge, it's sort of just very tree-shrouded and spooky area. And he was just pulling his horse and cart over the bridge, no street lighting, so very dark. And he said suddenly this sort of 5'5" ape-like creature came bounding out of the trees and essentially attacked him and the horse. And he described it as having these sort of weird, self-illuminating silver-white eyes. Yep. And, of course, there shouldn't be anything like that living in the wilds in Britain anywhere. No. And so, in other words, it was a definitively out-of-place animal. And he said he actually tried to hit it with his horse's whip. And, incredibly, the whip supposedly went through it, almost like it was spectral, like a supernatural thing. rather than like a flesh and blood creature. Now, what he did, he raced to, as he would do, being English, this is what we do best, he raced to the nearby pub, to tell everybody.
Grab a pint, yep.
Yeah, grab a pint,
Excuse me.
and, just tell everybody what had happened. And word got around as to, what the nature of the incident was. And the local police got involved. And one of the police officers said, "Oh, I know what that is. That's the man monkey." And it was sort of a local legend known in that area. And
very cool.
That's what it became known from then on, because it was like a man-like monkey. Now, since that day in 1879, there have been periodic reports of people seeing this creature in that same area. Now, of course, we're talking about reports going back to 1879 right up to the present day.
Yeah.
But it's always a solitary creature, always in the same place. It's like, and it really does sound like a spectral, ape-like creature that haunts the area in the same way, that a house might be haunted by a particular spirit. And the good thing was that where I used to live in England was only about a 25-minute drive from, or for where I lived for many years, I should say, was only about a 25-minute drive from this old stretch of canal, which is sort of very much in the rural countryside area. And even to this day, it looks like something, the whole area looks like something out of the Pound of the Baskervilles or whatever.
Very cool.
And so I got a lot of witness reports. I wrote a number of newspaper articles, which actually brought in a number of new witnesses. And so by about 2007, when I wrote the book, I'd got enough material to do a full-length study of it. Now, as I said, the interesting thing is that, where a lot of people place Bigfoot in a definitively flesh and blood category, there's no doubt, in my mind, that however we define the paranormal, the man-monkey fits more into that category. It constantly haunts this one area. And I'm sure it's the same in Australia, all around the world. For some reason, ancient bridges and crossroads seem to attract a lot of paranormal activity. A lot of legends and stories of ghosts and weird creatures seen at bridges.
Oh, well, that's it's like the troll, the children's book, the Troll Under the Bridge. I mean, this is where this all comes from, is folklore and legend. That's amazing. Now, I'm going to go on a few other ones here. I want to try and get as many rundown of these books as we can so people can actually go, oh, yeah, that's the one I want. Now, I'm quite interested also in the body snatchers in the desert. Yeah. Is that a UFO?
It's probably the most controversial book I've written. That's about the Roswell story.
Yeah.
And it's basically a study of a number of old-timers from the military I interviewed, probably now going back to about 1999 to about 2004. I put all their testimony into the book. And, I've always told people up front before I get to the book that, I can never be sure if they were telling the truth or if they were trying to confuse the story even more. But they basically all said they wanted to tell their side of the story about Roswell. And they claimed that, rather than being an extraterrestrial event, it was a sort of classified military experiment using human guinea pigs in sort of classified new novel aircraft designs. Now, people say, well, that's just a cover for the fact that a UFO really did crash and aliens were found. And I have to be honest, I can't deny that as a possibility. The thing with the book I pointed out was, all the people worked in the field of counterintelligence and spreading disinformation by their own admittance. But, the fact that I kind of was exposed to this weird world, was a story I wanted to tell and explain how and why it began. And, as I point out, to inform the reader, well, was I being exposed to the truth that everybody had overlooked, or was I being sort of reeled in like a fish on a hook to spread a fake story that was going to confuse the real story of Roswell even more? And it really was like a strange hall of mirrors type scenario that I'd never really been in, to that extent at least, before, of feeling, well, this is like something straight out of some sort of manipulative spy movie or whatever. But the story basically sort of said, they said, well, there were these classified high-altitude balloon and advanced aircraft experiments going on in the New Mexico desert in the 40s, and a couple of these prototype aircraft crashed, and we didn't want the Russians to know, so we hid it behind a UFO smoke screen, and then you find other cases where, the UFO sightings, genuine ones, have been hidden behind a military smoke screen. So is it the military hiding their experiments, or are they using their experiments to hide UFOs? It's sort of a really weird story. But I don't shy away from, in the book, explaining that to people. It's not like I'm coming across as like this is the story. This is the story I was told, and how can we take it further? And what does it all mean?
The books I have read of yours, I mean, lucky to read a few now, is that they're all very much like that. You don't shy away from the information you are given. It's pretty much how you've been told, which is wonderful. Now, but we're talking about, so they're claiming that these people were like experiment, because didn't they reckon that these people were altered? Like they were sort of genetically altered as well to fit within these aircraft and stuff like that?
Not in my book. There's actually a new book that talks about that. A book written by a woman named Annie Jacobson about Area 51 that's just come out. Now, in my book, they actually did talk about using handicapped people, but that they weren't genetically altered. They were just people that they claimed it was easy to get them from, like, asylums and
which is terrible.
Where they wouldn't be missed, which is terrible. Now, whether the story's true or not, the fact is that in the 40s, a lot of weird human experimentation was undertaken,
especially in Germany and Russia. They were very heavily into it.
Was going on, and my personal opinion on the UFO subject, I think there's an ours and there's a theirs thing. There's a genuine UFO phenomenon of unknown origins, but I think that the more our technology advances, it's becoming more and more difficult to differentiate between a genuine UFO from somewhere else, which clearly exists, and something that's still on the military's prototype secret list that for all the world looks like a UFO. And I think actually government agencies are quite happy for people to perceive everything weird in the sky as a UFO, because it acts as a good cover when they're test flying, things like these new weird looking Predators drones and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think there's two sides of the phenomenon. There's a genuinely unknown UFO phenomenon, but there's also our UFOs as well, I think.
And the amount of books you've written, and they're just the ones that I've been lucky enough to read, it's just amazing. Look, you've also, one of the books you wrote with Andy Roberts, your co-author Andy Roberts, was Strange Secrets. We've got about now 10 minutes to go on the show tonight, mate, and I'm trying to get as much information through to the listeners on the book subjects, so they've got a vast choice to choose from. Can you give us a bit of a rundown on Strange Secrets that you co-authored with Andy Roberts, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm sure a lot of people, are aware that over the years, government agencies all around the world, America, Australia, Britain, France, Russia, many other countries have done research into UFOs, and they've created files and documents and archives on UFO investigations.
Mm-hmm. That's with the Blue Book and stuff like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Project Blue Book, stuff like that. But a lot of people aren't aware that governments have opened files on a whole range of weird mysteries, and so Strange Secrets is a study, like a chapter-by-chapter study, sort of demonstrating to people that it's not just UFOs that governments collate files on. For example, we have sort of different chapters dedicated to different government files and investigations, and they range from everything from the Loch Ness Monster and sea serpents to cattle mutilations to a search for Noah's Ark, to spontaneous human combustion. The FBI's got like a huge file on
flames, spontaneous
flames.
Yep.
Yeah, so it covers things like that. Big cat reports running around Britain, remote viewing in ESP, life after death in the animal kingdom. All these different subjects attracted over the the 40s to the present day secret interest on the part of government agencies all around the world, and so. Because a lot of it hadn't been published, we thought, well, why not demonstrate to people that it's not just UFOs that the government looks at or looks for when it comes to weird phenomena. They've got the finger in all sorts of things.
Well, I've got some interesting trivia for you, mate. Since we got off the subject of the Men in Black, I haven't had any more phone problems.
Oh, good.
There you go.
I guess they're not bothered by Bigfoot. So.
No, there you go. Oh, now it's getting interesting. Okay, look. You've got, there's other books like there's Something in the Woods, Contactees. Now, Monsters of Texas interests me. Can you tell us a bit about Monsters of Texas? What was that about?
Yeah, well, that's a book I wrote with a good mate of mine named Ken Gerhard. And, I'm originally from England, but I live in Dallas. My wife's originally from America, and although she grew up in the Cayman Islands, and we live in Dallas, right just outside Dallas right now. And one of the interesting things about Texas, when I first moved over, I thought it was all, desert and cowboys and cactus and things like that.
Yeah.
Texas, particularly East Texas, very heavily forested and wooded, lots of big lakes, etc. And we get a lot of reports of strange creatures in Texas. A lot of Bigfoot reports, surprisingly enough, on the east side, which borders with Louisiana. And we get reports of big cats, large creatures like Mothman, like sort of large unidentified flying creatures, lake monsters, all sorts of things. And so me and Ken decided, well, why not try and write a book that covers the entire spectrum of weird creatures?
No, it sounds like an absolute fascinating read, actually.
Around some of the towns in Texas. So in other words, we thought, why not try and write a book that sort of is like a local, regional study of Texas weird creatures and monsters, and rather than focusing on one animal or a nationwide study, make it something that might appeal more to to residents of Texas.
And the last book, look, before we got to go tonight, and look, I can't thank you enough for coming onto the show too, Nick, and telling us your stories and explaining the Men in Black and these great books that people should.
Thank you.
No, but I got one last book we're going to do tonight before we got to go is everyone loves them, celebrities, but you've got celebrity secrets. What's the dirt? Come on, spill the dirt. What have you got for us?
Well, celebrity secrets again. One of the big interests of mine is government secrets, government files.
Yep.
And so rather than just, write a book about whatever Britney Spears is doing, this week or who.
Who cares?
Was to sort of look at what the government knew, the secrets that the government agency had uncovered on Hollywood stars. And a lot of people don't realize that throughout the years, from the 40s onwards, the FBI in particular was very closely watching a number of major Hollywood players for years. And very often it was because they either had a link to things like the mafia and the mob.
Or the Communist Party.
Perceived as communism, And so you had a lot of people like Marilyn Monroe being watched because of her links to the Kennedys, Frank Sinatra because of rumours of links to the mob. But there were a lot of people who you wouldn't even imagine were being watched. There was an extensive file on John Wayne because they were worried he was apparently funding some revolutionary group in South America. A lot of rock stars being watched because
of course,
J. Edgar Hoover freaked out, that they were trying to instill rebellion, in the US kids.
Wasn't
like
J. Edgar... Well, didn't J. Edgar Hoover like wearing dresses or something?
No, that's the rumor.
That's the rumor, yeah. So I do know a bit of my American history.
Yeah, the weird thing is he actually had like an obsessive I won't say interest, but obsessive concern about trying to out gay actors, and he opened files on people like Rock Hudson and wanting to know all the dirt on them, if there was anything he could use against them. And, a lot of the files do come across as being pretty vicious. It's like, wasn't really any reason to put these files together other than the fact that they just wanted to make the person's life miserable.
Because he was head of the FBI, wasn't he, at one stage?
He was the director of the FBI for 3 years. Yeah. So, literally decades, like 40, 50 years. And it's sort of a fascinating, weird aspect of, FBI history of how, they would just literally follow everybody around from like Elvis, to the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, the Doors, all sorts of people just watching, to see are they, trying to inflame the youth of America or whatever.
But it's surprising, just on that subject, how many famous people who may cause a bit of trouble just disappeared, or they died mysteriously, or they early in life, if you know what I mean. Maybe they were pushing the wrong buttons, and this is the thing, we don't know, do we? They're not going to bring
a lot of controversy, even to this day, about Marilyn Monroe. Next year, but the 50th anniversary of her death, and it's a lot of people talk about that. Was it accident? Was it suicide? Was she murder? Was she allowed to die? Things like this, and a lot of weird stuff about a number of celebrities who were being watched and died.
No, well, this is fantastic, mate. Look, and we have come up to the hour, unfortunately, and I hate when I have to do this because I do get messages from people saying they love speaking to our guests and they'd love to have longer and stuff like that. But I do know that you have other things you need to attend to, and I just like.
The thing I've got to do is go to the fridge. So.
I love it. Well, listen, Nick, I would love to get you back again sometime to talk more into your other books. Are you happy to do that in the near future?
Oh, yeah. You know, whenever you want me on, just let me know, and we can get it fixed up.
That's wonderful, mate. Listen, I'd just like to personally thank Nick Redfern, and please, if you go to his website, which is http ... what's that called? Colon?
Colon /
slash, yeah. Look, technical, aren't I? http : Nick Redfern's books, one word, .blogspot.com. You can get hold of Nick there, or you can actually, if you need to leave him any messages and like information that experience you had, please get in touch with me. I've got his personal details. I'll forward them on. And thank you again, Nick, for joining us tonight and for being such an enjoyment for our listeners as well on The Naked Zombie, mate.
Oh, well, thanks, Brad. Thanks a lot.
No worries, mate. I'll just get you hanging along there for a sec. And as I say each week when we come towards the end of the show, have a good night, have a safe night, and if you're out investigating, please take care of each other. You've been listening to Naked Zombie Paranormal Radio. I'm your host, Brad Scott, and we'll be seeing you all real soon. We've all been there. How hard is it to set up a website? And if you're not technically minded enough, it can be really frustrating. And the expense just seems to go on and on. But I've got something for you. How does your own website, 5 pages including a contact form, for $5.95? That's right, $5.95 for your very own website. This includes your social links, hosting domain. This is where it gets even better. If you have your own Flickr account or images on Facebook already, you only need to provide a link, and these can be included on the site for $5.95. Look, there's even more to this deal. Also feature a blog, and you will have the ability to update it anytime yourself. That's right, you don't need to pay someone to come and do it for you. Now, who do you need to speak to about this? There's one person you call, and that's Jamie Keogh at Key Designs, and their email address is, that's Jamie at keydesigns.com.au, KEYDESIGNZ.com.au.